Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, I'm Jason. If you're just stumbling across this episode, hey, guess what? I've got good news for you. We've got a bunch of other ones, and they're all really fun, and I enjoy all of them. And you can find them on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, except for Apple. It's a personal decision. You can also find links to all of our episodes and where you can listen to them at paranormalpatio.com. We also include some other stuff on the website, occasional articles and artifacts from the Paranormal Patio files, as well as links to, pick up a book from one of our guests or get in touch with them. And, of course, their YouTube videos or Instagrams or social medias. And speaking of social media, hey, I'm out there too. Paranormal Patio, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Just give us a search. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Barrie Gellis. And Barrie Gellis was a student of Jane Roberts, who was a channeler, who channeled an intelligence called SETH. That's a lot to take in just that one little sentence. But by the end of this interview, I think you'll have a pretty good understanding of what I'm talking about. This is a little bit different of an episode in that, channeling in and of itself is definitely, paranormal, or Barrie would argue that it's just natural. But we're not necessarily talking about ghouls and goblins tonight, as my driving point there. And it's a different type of episode, and it's an important episode for me because I found Jane Roberts and SETH through her books that were put out over decades. There's a large library of books on the topic. And I found that when I was a teenager, and it shaped a lot of who I am today. And I think you'll find something that you can take away from it as well. So definitely look into those and pick up a few copies for yourself. Also in this episode, I'm going to mention Michael Newton. Michael Newton was a clinical hypnotist and hypnotherapist. And he did some work where he stumbled into the existence of life between lives. And you should look into his books as well. They're called Journey of Souls is the first one, Destiny of Souls. And those two books in particular are very good. They are case studies. It's not like a typical book that you would, read a story from start to end. He highlights life between lives sessions and talks about them in great detail. And they're tremendous. And they totally fit in with the SETH material that you're going to hear about tonight. So if you're looking for some new books to read, there you go. But for now, welcome to the Paranormal Patio.
You're listening to the Paranormal Patio Podcast. Pull up a chair.
Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, I'm Jason. I'm joined tonight by Barrie Gellis, and I cannot wait for this interview because I have been waiting to talk to someone about SETH and Jane Roberts for a very long time, and I am absolutely pumped to present this. It's going to be a little bit of a different topic than what we normally feature on the show, but I think everyone will enjoy it because really when you get down to it, it's about channeling, and that definitely fits the profile of paranormal. So, Barrie, how are you tonight?
I am fine. We'll have a paranormal chat and a /normal chat all at once.
Yes, exactly. It's
and
perfect.
this SETH material itself actually includes everything, because like he has a book that's called The Nature of Personal Reality, The Nature of Mass Events. So actually any subject from baseball to the game of Risk to ghosts, to anything, it's all included in the SETH material, because the SETH material is just about your life, living your life and trying to understand yourself, and a little bit more than that, but just very generally speaking.
Sure. Before we get into the SETH material, can you kind of let everybody know a little bit about yourself and how you came to find yourself into the SETH material?
Sure. I'm an Jane Roberts used to hold these classes in Elmira, New York in the early 70s, and I was a member of those original classes. Right now, I'm a retired teacher, an English teacher from New York City, and some of my friends got involved with the SETH material in 1972, and then I had been away for a few months in another city. I was in Houston, they were in New York, Queens, we're from Queens, New York. And when I came back in 72, they told me about it, and I went up to class, and then that's how I got involved in it.
What exactly did they say? Like, how did they get you to be interested in it?
My group of friends were very, I don't know if it was of the time, but we're very kind of, we were what you'd call just like regular, I don't know, hippie type people, long hair, smoking pot, doing different drugs. And in the time I'm talking about in 72, I was 22. And my friends had gotten involved and so we were spiritually minded, and then they had gotten involved in some kind of a cult group that I did not go to at all. It was just really not unpleasant. So, but we remained friends. And then that guy died, and he had told them about Seth, and Jane didn't like him, the leader of this group, but he liked them, my friends. So they went up there, and what they told me is that they said this is positive. This guy was very negative, the other guy. They explained this was just positive. I think they told me just some ideas about it. They showed me something that Seth said. And it just it fit into my way of thinking, so I decided to go up with them. Of course, going up is a 5-hour trip each way by car, but that's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity, especially after that first time, I'm sure. It was an opportunity that you wouldn't have missed out on if you could possibly help it.
Yeah, I don't remember now. It was something that was just interesting. I'm looking for interesting things. Now, I've written poetry. I've written about 4,000 plus poems. And so that keeps me in touch with myself. So I was always on this journey, let's say, inner awareness and exploration. This just fit right in. I mean, some people seek out something because they're unhappy, they're struggling, they're searching for something. I wasn't really searching, for something outside myself, but I trusted my friends, and then this thing came along. It worked out very well.
That sounds terrific, and I'm jealous that I was born when I was born, for lots of reasons, mainly, but this whole movement that happened in the late 60s and early 70s, it's always been really interesting to me. There were so many people that were channeling all of these different intelligences and the free love movement and all this great music, and I really feel like I'm just a little bit misplaced. I just missed the mark by like 20 years, and it is what it is. I can't change that. But I found and related to the material in, I would say, 2002 or 2003. And I just picked up a book randomly at it was a Books A Million store, which I'm not sure what sort of subsidiary that is of what corporation. But I picked it up and I thought, this looks interesting. I read the back cover. I read a few pages and I was like, I think I'll go ahead and buy this. So I bought it and I read it in like 3 days. It was Seth, Dreams and Projections of Consciousness was my first Seth book. I loved it, and I've got a couple of original printings of some other books and then some reprintings, and I don't have all of them, but I do have a decent amount of Seth material.
There's a guy named John Climo who wrote a book called Channeling, and he credits Jane and Seth with ushering in the whole New Age movement. When Seth started coming through Jane, like in 1963 about, there was nothing going on like that. And then they started the classes in about 67. And then when I joined it in 72, and of course there was no internet, so it was hard for people to know anything that's going on. With the Seth books, he must have written about, I guess, 30 books in different ways. And if you haven't read, he suggested, or Jane suggested, there's a book called The Seth Material. That's just, it's a great summary of how Seth came about and what his philosophies are in quotes. And then there's Seth Speaks. That's like the first book he wrote. The Nature of Personal Reality was the second book. So, and if you haven't read either of those, I would recommend to you or anyone to read those 3 books. They give you a good I mean, the books are incredible, like you said.
Yeah, they certainly are. And I know you've touched just now about like how this whole thing kind of started. Can you fill everyone else in?
Well, my understanding is, it's in the books there, she was a poet, a science fiction writer, and she didn't believe in reincarnation and things like that. But she got an assignment to do a book on ESP, and in that book, they practiced, they did a Ouija board, and somebody came through named Frank, I think Frank Withers was his name, was like, or some person, but it was connected to Seth, and then that ended up becoming, Seth coming through to them. And Jane, and then, they were using the Ouija board, then Jane started to get the words herself, and then she started to speak for Seth eventually, maybe, I don't know if it was a few weeks or a few months. But that's how Seth came through to them. And then they did years of testing. There's a series of books called The Early Sessions. There's 9 of them. That's starting from the first Ouija board session. And there's about up until the next 500 sessions about. And then the next session began the official book. The first official Seth book was Seth Speaks. But in the early sessions books, which are all the sessions leading up to Seth Speaks, they document all the testing they did because they didn't know if Jane was losing her mind, what was going on. So they did ESP testing, psychological testing. She went to some doctors, and it ended up being legitimate. And what's important is really the quality of the material. If somebody claims something's coming from a fire hydrant, but the material is great and it rings true, fine. It's an interesting fire hydrant.
I love that.
That's what's important. It has to ring true to you, whatever it is you're following, or like I never would consider myself a follower. I never followed Seth at all. I always answer to myself, which Seth recommends everybody does. Because if you don't answer to yourself, you're not even there to change your mind or anything. You're just listening, and it's kind of, you become a non-entity just following. So everybody should always trust themselves first before me, you, Seth, or anybody. You have to trust yourself.
If you could narrow this down, and this is going to be an incredibly hard question, but if you could narrow it down to a few things that are discussed in the Seth material as a whole, what are some of the things that you feel you really gravitate towards that really got you to sink your teeth into the whole experience?
The idea that people are good, people are intrinsically good, they're innately good-loving and compassionate. The idea that we're as dead right now as we'll ever be. The idea that time is simultaneous, so you could die in, let's say, in the year 2020 and be reborn in 1970. Yeah, the idea that you create your own reality, that reality is based on your beliefs attract the reality, and also your thoughts physically create the objects of reality. Those would be just some off the top of my head. And dreams continue after you wake up is a good one.
Even if you don't believe that it's coming from some non-physical entity somewhere, in existence in some sort of dimension, the message is still, a really good message, like you had mentioned before.
When I was, I started with like 1972 in October, and then I was putting something together for I think a presentation I was going to give, and I realized, I learned something, where I gathered the material, that the most important thing in the Seth material is actually love. And that sounds like trite or something. But according to Seth, love is the whole foundation of existence. It's what holds the universe together. And from putting different things in different places together, I had heard of The Secret. I think most people are aware of The Secret. But The Secret I discovered through myself and through reading the Seth material, not reading it, but looking at it anew, this time I looked at it anew, that the secret was really only half the secret. That the first half of The Secret is you create your own reality via your thoughts, beliefs, etc. But the second half of The Secret that is unsaid and unspoken is while you're creating your own reality, you're to do so with helping and not harming others. And according to the Seth material, if you do that, if you learn you create your own reality and you're in touch with your nature, which is human nature of goodness, love, goodness, and compassion, and acting in harmony with that, that's what you need. That's what we hear. That's why we created physical reality, according to Seth. That's why we created physical reality in the first place, to learn those things, and then you could move on to other realities in which, reality creation is instant, there's no linear time, and it's more intense. So ultimately, that message, which wasn't what I originally got, which is kind of what you asked me before, but looking back at it now, that to me is the most important message in the Seth material. That yes, you create your own reality, but you also have to do so and include helping and not harming others. Because mostly what I read about The Secret, and I could be pretty ignorant on that if I didn't read the proper things, but I don't remember other people being mentioned. It's like the secret is you can get what you want, you can get abundance, and if you want to help somebody else, you model abundance for them. Kind of like in my mind, you drive by a homeless person in a car and you wave and you say, you could get this car too. Whereas, Seth brings home really about the importance of helping others and not harming others. There's a whole thing in the Seth material that's called violations of natural guilt. This is tying into what I'm saying here, because natural guilt, according to Seth, it's not like you feel guilty because, you did something. Natural guilt, he says, is something you feel. It's like an inner tugging we feel when we harm somebody, when we're going to repeat a harmful act. Again, this is based on our nature. If you accept the belief or the idea that our nature is, being good, compassionate, and loving, when you violate that nature of yourself, you get an inner tugging not to repeat that. So you shouldn't repeat that. And Seth calls that natural guilt. And the violation, because some people think, you're violating somebody else. How could you do that? We got to get into victims and no victims and you create your own reality. But in any case, the whole idea of violations and natural guilt is what keeps steering us in the direction to be nice to other people and to be loving. You don't have to just blindly just be nice to anybody. But there's this, we have an instinct to help. I guess is what I'm trying to say, which is that's also found in the Seth material. And that linear time, most people who are into New Age stuff, put down, say, time isn't real, it's just linear time, non-physical reality is the important thing, where there's no time and this and that. But linear time and physical reality are crucial to our spiritual growth, because you need linear time in order to have the pause of reflection before you act. And that's where the natural guilt thing kicks in. So before you're going to harm someone else, there's linear time. So it takes a moment for things to happen. And also you could change your mind. If you're going to do something and you just don't want to do it, you change your mind. So linear time is crucial to our spiritual development, as well as physical reality with its vulnerability and all these other things. We didn't become physical just to wish we weren't physical. It's like here to learn from, to use, to navigate. Okay, I think I've said a lot without a question.
No, I'm letting you have it because you know a lot more about this than I do. And for me, I'm kind of sitting under the learning tree right alongside my guests. So I absolutely love, you can go on as long of a little tangent as you feel you need to before you exhaust yourself.
Okay. Well, that came out, so somehow.
Let's move to, what is Seth? Who is Seth?
Well, Seth just says he's a personality that no longer needs a physical body. He calls it the camouflage of physical reality. If we create our own reality, the practical part of it is, Seth says we create the objects we see. So, and in creating these objects, we're in constant telepathic communication with each other. When 5 people walk in the room, they see one TV set physically, but according to this theory of reality creation, each person is creating the TV set for themselves to see, that is kind of all superimposed where they all agree the TV is supposed to be. So physically speaking, there's like one TV there. But it's really, if you want to put it another way, there's 5 TVs superimposed on each other. But there's always sometimes little differences that most people just pass by as maybe a faulty memory, but or something. But usually the differences aren't crucial. Although sometimes in police reports, I think they come up when somebody says, well, the perpetrator had a mustache. No, he didn't have a mustache. He was wearing a sweater. No, he was wearing a shirt. Each person creates what they see. So when you ask details about it, there might be discrepancies. So Seth calls the physical reality that we create a camouflage reality. It's like a camouflage. He calls physical reality framework 1, and non-physical reality is framework 2 or F2. So from F2, from framework 2, from non-physical reality, that's where we conjure up physical reality. And so Seth, it would be a personality that just no longer needs the camouflage of physical reality anymore. He's moved on. He said he's been human many times, and now, he's moved on. He was actually connected to Jane and Rob in past lives, he said, and that he couldn't have even come through if they didn't have that connection. And he needed Rob, her husband, to be there just as much. They all had the same, I guess, oversoul or entity, or I'm not sure what you'd call it exactly. So they needed that connection. But Seth would just be, I would simply say, a personality that no longer needs the camouflage of physical reality.
Would you say that it's fair then to consider dreams and astral projection part of Framework 2?
Framework 2, non-physical reality, would be everything that's not physical. Like when you're in the dream state, would be in Framework 2. Out of bodies, yes, would be in Framework 2. The telepathic communication, because according to Seth, we're in constant telepathic communication. One of the ideas of there being no accidents or no victims, but I have to get into that in more detail because it doesn't mean people don't hurt each other at all. But the idea is that because let's say you're leaving your house, beforehand that if you leave your house at 101, a brick is going to fall and hit your head. If you leave at 102, nothing will happen. 103, you'll find $20 on the street. I'm making this very simple. And then the phone rings when you leave and you're deciding to answer the phone or not. To make these decisions, we're constantly blinking in and out or flickering in and out of physical reality and non-physical reality, or flickering in and out of F1 and F2. And so F2, that would be in Framework 2, that would be like our subconscious mind, and in some cases maybe unconscious mind, subconscious. So when you're deciding to answer the phone or not, because you're leaving the house and the phone just rang as you're opening the door, you're physically, because you're half in F1 and half in F2 all the time. But in F2, that's outside of linear time. So in F2, you're exploring all the different, what Seth would call probable realities that could occur. And then you choose, not consciously, but you choose which probable reality you want to physicalize to make happen. So you choose, well, I want to find $20. So you choose to, answer the phone, have a 3-minute conversation and go out. Or you choose, this is the time for me to, I'm finished. I did all my things about being alive. I think a good way to go is to get hit on the head with a brick by accident, quote unquote accident. So I'll leave the house at that time. In F2, non-physical reality, that's where we contact dead people. That's where out-of-bodies occur. Everything that was non-physical is non-physical reality. And physical reality is we conjure that up out from that. But when you're sitting eating pizza at a pizza place, a kind of metaphor would be, or an analogy, I don't know, you have one foot in the non-physical reality and one foot in physical reality all the time. Except we're flickering so quickly that we can only physically see that we're here all the time. We don't see the blinkings and flickerings. Although I think quantum physics has things that go along with this flickering and blinking thing. which I'm changing the subject a little bit because it just came to my mind. This is what reminds me when people in the UFO community now say we're a computer, was it a simulation or something? Because they're flickering. Being a computer simulation is just the latest, the latest surface idea. You know, there used to be devils and angels, and then it was rocket ships. I believe when they're perceiving something flickering, they're actually seeing the truth about how reality is created in these flickers. But they're associating it with a computer. But I don't think it's a computer simulation at all. It's just that they happen to be perceiving reality as it actually gets created by this flickering, this constant, each instant. We're coming in and out of reality. So even if you're having an argument with somebody and you're both yelling and screaming, you would be to say, you know, go to hell, you moron, or let's forget about it, whatever it is. You would be into F2 and you could explore 100 years in F2 or 20 years or 10 hours and then come right back to the moment of that argument. But in that exploration, that's how you decide what to say next or what not to say. Because there's much more to, obviously, physical reality and non-physical reality than we think. But if there are no accidents on this level, this expansive level, there has to be a mechanism of how it all occurs, you know. So there are no accidents doesn't mean there's not an appearance of an accident. There are appearances of accidents all the time. It just means on this deeper level, this is what we subconsciously chose for our purposes, whatever those purposes are.
You had mentioned also alongside there not being any accidents about not being victims. You said you wanted to come back to that.
This whole idea of victims and not victims gets me sometimes annoyed because it leads to this callousness and I'd almost say cruelty of some New Age folks that go, well, you know, you created that reality. You know, don't say you're a victim. You're not a victim. Yeah, on this deeper level, there are no victims because you're choosing it. But there's I call it an event equation. It's two parts of it. There's you as the person choosing subconsciously. Let's say I want to be, you know, murdered on the street. I'm subconsciously choosing that for whatever reason. Let's just say I'm not aware of it. According to the idea of reality creation and your law of attraction, I'm now attracting somebody who is willing to do that. But that person is not obligated to do that. He could be drawn to this. This is all in, you know, F2, let's say, or however you want to call it, telepathically, drawn to the situation. But that's the only way he could face the choice to actually kill someone or not. He could find himself in that situation because free will is always, you know, operating. But so he can then say, you know, not physically say, but kind of say, you know, I'm not going to do this. I now realize I don't want to murder you. You want to be murdered still. You go find someone else to do it. I'm not going to do it. So most people, when they talk about victim, no victim, first of all, they only concentrate on the victim, you know, on the person that's being hurt. They don't concentrate on the person who has the conscious choice to act out that harm or not act out that harm. To me, a victim is someone who did not consciously choose to be hurt, did not consciously put himself in a dangerous situation. Then you're a victim. You could be a victim of a hurricane, a victim of, you know, a victim of a war. A victim is someone who didn't consciously desire to be hurt. That doesn't mean you didn't subconsciously or, you know, telepathically or whatever want these things. Want is the wrong word. But we have beliefs, and our beliefs help create reality. So if you believe life is dangerous, then you're going to attract dangerous situations. You know, we attract these different things. So on one level, yeah, you're not a victim because you subconsciously chose this event or attracted this event because of your beliefs. And on the other level, because you didn't consciously want to be harmed, you're giving somebody the opportunity kind of to harm you or not. You're giving them the choice. On that level, you are a victim because it's not something you've consciously wanted. But it's good to be aware of if you want to be. That even in those cases, there was still a part of you that wanted, you know, want isn't the right word, but that it wanted it to happen, attracted it to happen, or accepted it. Like someone who believes love is always bad, you always hurt in love, they're going to attract people to act that out. They have their reasons for being attracted to that. So they're telepathically agreeing to do this dance about how love is, dangerous, or love is unhappy and unpleasant, just because that's what they're attracting to themselves.
How do I want to word this?
Word it any way you want.
It has the potential when you are slightly uneducated on this, you have the potential for controversy.
Yeah, none of this excuses or justifies violence or harming anybody else. If you want to speak according to the SETH material, violence is never justified. And if one person is starving somewhere in the world, you're starving in ways you don't realize. If this is not justifying violence, it's not saying it is okay, it's nothing like that. It's kind of the mechanism how things come to exist, how things come to be. And it doesn't mean that you deserve it or you're to blame or, I'm talking about the victim person now. But it's a mechanism. It's the mechanism of how events come to pass, as opposed to some kind of, something else. So maybe that was wrongly anticipating your question, but,
no, I think you summed it up well. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that aspect of the victimhood in a dual framework existence. I understand the whole principle there. My point was that people who are uninitiated to that hear what you said and construe it in a way to say, well, nobody is ever really a victim because they chose that, and then they're going to choose to attack on that.
Right. That's why I'm trying to say this other part of it.
Yeah.
There's levels of speaking, and one level doesn't transfer or translate into another level, So if you want to say there are no victims, what that really is saying is that you create your own reality. You are connected to events that happen to you, that there are no random events in the universe or in your life. There's nothing random. Things happen for a reason and a purpose. If you have that in your mind, you start then looking for the reason and the purpose. Like, my son was 25. He was killed in a hit and run accident in 1996.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, thank you. But so the point I'm trying to say is that, so I was able to ask questions because of the belief system I had in place. So I think originally people shout to themselves and scream, oh no, this can't be. It's not happening. It's not real. They're actually correct, because what they think is happening, that death being the end and that the person's gone, that is not happening. The person, because life continues after you die. So then what I did and what you couldn't do unless you had this belief is, well, why did this happen? First of all, it removed me from feeling like I was a victim. Right off the bat, I said, he's not a victim and I'm not a victim, because on the level I'm speaking at, this was chosen. But that begins the inner journey of exploring, well, why was it chosen? Why would he choose to die this way at that time? Why would I be a part of it? And by extension, also everybody who knew him would also be a part, because they're not a victim of it either. So not being a victim is more important in terms of what is your connection to what happened, and what are you, and I'm putting this in quotes, getting out of it. Like if you're in a horrible relationship, what you're getting out of it is you're proving yourself that belief that relationships are horrible. Love is dangerous. So you find yourself in a bad relationship. That's what you're getting out of it. You're getting out of it the proof of your belief. You see what I mean? So it's not, I understand how people take it, because believe me, I faced it a lot with people, and I understand, and I could see how they feel that way without understanding it further. And then, some people who are into New Age stuff don't help when they just double down on, well, you're not a victim in that. It's much more deeper, complicated, and compassionate than that.
I'd like to expand on this while we're on this subject and interject another author that I came across around the same time. His name was Michael Newton. He was a clinical hypnotist who was doing a regression session with a client at one point and stumbled into what he began to call life between lives. It coincided really well with what I had read about Seth. In his studies with several hundred clients over his life, doing this life between lives regression, he kind of formed this backlog of case studies that highlighted people choosing the life that they're going to live before they even begin to live it. And that oftentimes in situations where, say, you want to learn how to handle a loss of a parent at a young age, you would choose to do that. And at the same time, going back to what you mentioned about the brick falling because you left at a certain time, and you get hit in the head with a brick, you can also expand into, you have to have someone who else is willing to be that parent. And then whenever the stars align just right, then, boom, there you are. And you're both getting what you're seeking in this life. Does that sound?
Yeah, that's totally what's part of the Seth material as well. You choose your own parents, you choose the family situation you're born into, and you also choose your exact method and moment of death. So, and if nothing's written in stone though, so you could choose, certain parents because you want to experience what you said, and at that time also they feel, like the mother is believing or choosing on this level that, when she'll die when the kid is 7 years old, let's say, or whatever. But these things you could also change. So there are no accidents of the family you're born into, but it doesn't mean it's destiny or it has to be that way because we have free will. Free will can't be overlooked. So someone could be born into a bad family, a family in which they're abused, let's say, because in a past life, they were always given everything, and they just relied on other people to feel love and to feel this. So when they died, again, in the end, this in-between state, you choose, and also relationship to other lifetimes you have, which are all happening simultaneous, but you choose that the next life, I'll put next in quotes, but the next life, you need to learn to get the inner feelings of self-worth on your own and not rely on others. So in part, that might be why you chose to be born into an abusive household. So you could really, from scratch, let's say, build up that idea of self-esteem. But according to the Seth material, and when I say according to the Seth material, it means it rings true to me as well. Is that you choose, like you were saying, your life, your parents, the whole situation, the era, the time period, the location of your birth, and, same thing about your death. So I would agree with that doctor on that. I expanded on it a little bit where it includes other lifetimes as well. I mean, sometimes because we're all connected in the expanse of reality, which is like the non-physical reality.
To further a little bit on Michael Newton, and I don't want to steer us totally off track, but another thing that relates to this directly is the question was asked, what about stillborn births? What about abortions? Why would anybody ever choose to have a life where they die when they're born or they die when they're 2 weeks old? And the answer that he gave was, you don't always choose the life for your experience. Sometimes somebody else needs to have an experience and you have to be a part of that. Would you say that also falls into the same belief system that Seth presented?
Yeah, that would be definitely. And he spoke about that also. Yeah, that a person, a baby that has a miscarriage or has an abortion, that is the life, that's the life experience they needed. They didn't need to live to be 90. Like in the case of my son, I don't believe he needed to move into that next stage of adulthood. But yeah, and whatever you do always involves, I believe, other people as well. Because they're learning. You always hear when somebody dies, let's say a kid dies and a parent, or maybe a spouse, they suddenly move in a new direction, in a more spiritual direction. And part of the reason that person died, I believe, is to urge that person to move that person on to the new direction And they also had their own intimate reasons of dying at that time as well. Yeah, so a baby who gets a miscarriage or an abortion, or whatever it is, knows that that's going to happen and is choosing to have that experience, that limited that limited experience in physical reality, even though it's in somebody else's body, like as a fetus, but that it was all agreed upon and chosen, everything is agreed upon according to this philosophy, subconsciously, telepathically agreed to. But I think that fits with Newton.
Yeah, if anyone that's listening hasn't heard of or read anything by Michael Newton, look him up. I think he passed away in the mid-2000s or 2010s. He's actually not alive now. I could be totally wrong on that. I might be confusing that with something else. But his books are kind of I don't know, I don't want to say a more practical way of conveying the same information, but in a lot of ways I think that's fair to say. It's like a more modern telling of some of these aspects that Seth presents. And I definitely encourage anyone to read them. They're very, very good.
Yeah, and I know I was going to mention at the end, but that I have the book called The Seth Material Q&A, Spiritual and the Journey of Self-Awareness. And it's like a 500-page book, and I do answer in very practical terms questions that were given to me online or in person. And that also, it's on Amazon, but that you could find a lot of the answers to these questions or, in that as well. But I think in a way you're selling Seth a little bit short because of, it is there. Maybe it's not there in one place like in this book, which I would, from the way you're describing it, I'd encourage people to look at. But, if they read the Seth books, they'll see for themselves whatever it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I didn't mean to convey that I thought it was a superior presentation or anything, by any stretch of the imagination. No. Just that some aspects that are shared are definitely presented in a more modern, as opposed to a book written in the 70s.
Yeah, well, the 70s wasn't another century. Well, it actually was another century.
It was.
No, but the Seth material, it has such depth to it. Like, it doesn't just say, like what we're talking about at the afterlife, in between lives. It just connects it to so many other things. It doesn't just say you create your own reality, but it goes into so much more. It's like a spider web of ideas connecting to your whole life, as opposed to a thing here and a thing there and a thing there. It's a real in-depth type of material. And it's different than other channeled materials, like in some ways. Like Seth says, physical reality,
I think,
is a good thing. It's a happy thing. You got to experience it. Your body is your soul in flesh. There's not a separation. There's not like your body isn't lower and your soul is higher, or the non-physical reality is higher and the physical reality is lower. It's all one. It's all interconnected, and has its unique joy that you can't find anyplace else.
Yeah, I think that this is a good time to kind of change gears because even though this is sort of, this is beyond normal reality for most people, this is a paranormal podcast, and I wanted to try to bring some aspects of that into, or pull some aspects from Seth into this sort of framework that I have for my show. And I had asked you, or I mentioned to you that I'd like to talk about a few things. One of them that I'd like to get Seth's, or your interpretation of Seth's interpretation on, is, let's say, ghosts. Let's start there. The interactions between ghosts and living people. Let's go there.
I'm not sure how to. I know that there are certain ghosts that are always repeating the same thing over and over again, like walking up the stairs or downstairs, which that would more kind of liken to somebody with that, what is it called, OCD, where you keep tapping the same thing and you're caught in the same thing. But ghosts are just a physicalization of dead people. We talk to dead people in our dreams. Some people have the ability to physically see things that are in the non-physical world, but they're very normal to jump on your term paranormal. You know, if we're as dead right now as we'll ever be, which is one of Seth's phrases, we're already dead. The dream state is the closest to the death state. So seeing a ghost is just being able to see what's normal, what's normally there. They're dead, you know. There's nothing, I don't mean this in a bad way, there's nothing special about ghosts. It's just one aspect of that, you know, life continues after death.
Fair enough. And I agree. What about extraterrestrial intelligences?
According to the Seth material, and I agree, that UFOs or the intelligences, they different things. They come from other dimensions. They come from other time periods. They're us coming from the future, you know, that they've been around a long time, forever. And that we can't, when somebody comes from another planet, you know, or another dimension, it's hard sometimes to get into our reality from their reality. And that's what he said causes different shapes. He says, like, when we see shapes of UFOs, that's really a distortion of what they really look like. But UFOs would be, again, all those different things, and that, you know, they're real. There's something called SETH too. There's SETH. Okay, SETH comes through Jane. Then there's something that they call SETH 2. And SETH 2 is as like far removed from us, far removed from SETH as we are, as SETH is to us. So SETH 2 has never been physical. And SETH 2 says that he's from this, I don't know, beings or a group of people that gave us the blueprint to create physical reality in the first place. And there are a number of things that SETH 2 has said that does remind me of things that people say about extraterrestrials. And one other thing, in the book Seth, the Seth material, a friend of Jane's, drew a picture. Seth said, "I'm going to try to make myself physical," because he doesn't. And somebody there was able to draw, and he saw Seth physical for a little bit, and he drew a picture of it, and it actually looks like what we would consider an alien. You know, it looked like with the head and the row. I wish I could, you know, maybe I could show you. I could email it to you. But they do include that photo in the Seth material. So I think that there's a connection when it comes to UFOs. The important connection is the spiritual side of it, not the physical side of it. That there's this interconnection, an ancient thing going on with UFOs that each time period sees in their way. So when people used to believe in angels and devils, I don't think they saw it like we did. Oh, it's like an idea. I think they physically saw angels and devils the same way we physically see automobile. That they created angels and devils for them to see. And that's how they interpreted the UFOs and the aliens and stuff, because that's the only thing they could accept. Other people believed in leprechauns, and we believed in rocket ships, and it became spaceships. Now we're into computers and stuff, so now there's computer simulations. I think those are just camouflage. Those are just the latest, the leading edge of what our, you know, technological minds can accept. But what they really are, I think, goes way beyond that. I just think it's more than that. And I think the idea of this, I always hear about this war going on, the aliens are having a war, and there's a battle, or whatever. I just don't buy that. Because there has to be some kind of spiritual evolution, and somebody who's been around a million years, it's not going to be as cowboys and Indians. You know, we have our idea of cowboys and Indians. So everything we see is cowboys and Indians, the good guys and the bad guys. There's the good aliens and the bad aliens. If they wanted to hurt people or Earth, I believe, you know, they could do it in a half a second. But we're always trying to translate events or these inner things into terms that we could grasp and understand. So that's my take on it. I think that they're there, as I said. I hear a lot of positive messages coming, you know, like channeling messages coming from different ones, and that's good. You know, it's positive. I don't really believe that this idea of good versus evil. Like that's something that's going on in the universe. I just think that the universe is good, and that there's a goodness beyond our duality of good and evil.
There is a growing, I guess we just call it a growing belief in the paranormal researcher field that ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, all of this stuff is all just a different physical aspect of a soul thing, a different facet of the same diamond. Let's just use that analogy. That kind of ties in exactly with what you're saying. Would you agree?
Well, I don't know if it, like right now, the theory here that we're working on is, as humans, is that each person has what you can call an oversoul or a whole self. And that oversoul sends forth personalities in different time periods. And they're all occurring simultaneous. So time is more like a onion getting fatter as opposed to a line getting longer. And so you could have, as I said, you could be born, you could die in 2020 and be reborn in 1970. And so there could be people who are tied to you instead of reincarnationally tied, like from your past. You could both be living in the same time period. So it's like having a reincarnational self, so to speak, in your time period, and you could meet that person. Seth calls them counterparts. So we would all be connected, you would be connected to your oversoul, and so would all your other selves or reincarnational selves from the past and the future, and maybe the present. And all the oversouls themselves would be connected to each other. Now, when it comes to aliens, let's say someone from another dimension or these ancient beings that are never even been physical in the first place, I don't think they're a part of the system as we're describing it, this kind of physical system. I think they're behind the creation of the physical system. Again, when it comes to other dimensions, I would say that they have their other dimensions. And Bigfoot has its own place. I think there's some things metaphysical about Bigfoot. I don't think it's just like a species. And if you want to say on some level, everybody's a part of all that is and we're all connected, maybe, but I don't think that's in any terms practical, practical. It doesn't matter if we're connected. Let's say we're connected. I know, but again, I think we are connected actually to these non-physical beings that have never been physical at all. I think there's a connection, but not on we share the same oversoul. I think that there's something we do share on some deep levels.
People create their reality. It's not just a personal reality. It's also a group effort, so to speak, correct?
Right, a mass reality.
Yes. And so if we take this into sort of the magical side, we start talking about things like egregores and tulpas. So a tulpa would be something that you are able to create with your own personal focus and energy, a non-existent by any other means entity that has its own intelligence that you sort of program into it. Okay. And it exists. One of the earliest stories that I remember reading was a young woman who, I don't even remember where she lived, but she lived near some sort of a monastery. And she would imagine every day this monk would come by, like fetching water. One day she realized she saw the monk, but she didn't think about the monk that day. It continued to exist without her thinking of it. And it took on its own life. And so that is a tulpa. And an egregore would be something that a mass group of people would create, which would be things that make, in a certain way, makes every religion real, or political beliefs even. You create this thing that becomes real, at least in our physical reality and the way we think about it. According to the Seth material, there's not a true religion, right?
Right.
So there are so many different religions that all believe that they are the true religion, they are real. They create these gods, they create these devils, so to speak. And to them, in this reality, those things exist. And because enough people believe them, they do exist in some aspect.
That's what I was saying about the angels and devils back in the day. That they created them for them to see. They believed in them so strongly. It wasn't like a fantasy idea we think of as some kind of whatever. They physically saw devils, I believe, and they physically saw angels because they created them and in the manner you're speaking.
So could Bigfoot and fairies and things of that nature feasibly be just that then?
I would say it could be either one. Like, you just reminded me of a few things. If I want to just not to forget them. First of all, about religions, I always found it funny and ironic that you happen to be born into the right religion, that everybody happens to be born into the religion that's true.
Yeah.
You know, that was always weird. But about probable realities, remember I said, like, you're having an argument or you're walking out the door. There are an infinite number of probable realities. So it's not just like three things. You're going to get hit by a brick or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But according to the SETH material, each probable reality continues on its own. So if there's one, to simplify it, that you were going to be, I don't know if you wanted to play baseball or be a doctor, who knows what, and I'm simplifying it to one thing, that continues. That is happening. You are, that every probable reality continues on, and to them, we are one of the invisible probable realities. To them, they're the reality. So to all these infinite probable realities that we create, each one of them see themselves as the physical reality and all the others as the non-physical probable realities. So right now, we're all these non-physical probable realities to all these other, other things. And now with dreams, same thing. We go to sleep and have a dream. We don't start a dream. We wake up into a dream, into a situation that's already occurring. It's like we become conscious in the people who are in that dream and to who you think you are. And sometimes if you get a chance and you could remember to like look at yourself in a mirror in a dream, you might not look anything like you. You just hear your voice, so you think it's you, but it might not look like you at all. But the point is, the dream continues. And each person in the dream has choices to make. So they're creating their own probable realities, their own infinite number of probable realities. And each one of them are going to sleep and having their own dreams. And this is what I think is behind the seeming expansion of the universe. This ever expanding probable and dream realities that just nonstop into infinity. Because, the probable reality of you being a doctor, that goes to sleep, he has his dreams. Do you get this point? This ever-expanding, probable and dream realities that don't end, the lives continue on. So the universe it's why it seems to be expanding, I think. It is expanding on this level. And physically, it materializes as a physical universe that's always expanding.
Very good points. Very good points.
So about those two things, I think that's, again, I'll use the word natural and normal, because there's so many things we think of as paranormal that are just not understood, but are actually normal. And that I think you said tulpa, I don't know exactly if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah.
The non-existent, I think that's an ongoing thing that we do. I don't think it happens to one person. I think if it happens, you wouldn't even be aware of it necessarily. And, same thing with the mass things. So yeah, mass events are everybody creating the event for our own personal reason and for the mass reason, for whatever the mass reason would be.
I know you mentioned your book. I'd like for you to maybe shed a little bit more light on that and tell people where they could pick one up.
It's in question and answer form, and there's some, obviously I'm going to say it's excellent, but people have also told me they find that explaining things like simultaneous time in simple terms, but also just questions, like everyday questions, are in there. And as I said, it's about 500 pages. It's called SETH Material Q&A, The Spiritual Inner Journey of Self-Awareness. Original SETH class member answers your questions. And it can be gotten on Amazon. Or if they email me, I could if somebody orders it through me, it's $20 it's $20. I think $19.95, $20 on Amazon. But if they order it through me, which I'm not suggesting they could or not do, it's their choice. I do something. I charge $30 though, not $20. But what I do is I include out of those poems that I write. I have a number of poems written almost on every day. So people give me their birthday, I'll include poems I wrote on their birthday over the decades, and I'll also sign the book and write a little note to them. But that'll be if they did it through me, because I can't do that through Amazon. So they could get it through Amazon or through me. My email, Bargell, BARGELL @AOL.com. They can get it that way. And I also have a poetry book out, only one, called Outside is a Secret Key, which they can get on Amazon as well. Those are my two books, and I want to publish a lot more poetry books because I have like a lot of poems.
This has been great, and I hope in the future we can have you come back to the show and we can talk some more about Seth. I think that'd be wonderful.
Listen, whenever you want, I will come back. Also, I don't know if you get any feedback from people, but if you get any questions from anybody, you could, pass them on to me and, as we're talking, live, spontaneously, just give me the questions. I'll try to answer them. If you come up with new questions, if you want to write them down or however you do that for yourself, I'll be glad to answer, your questions or anyone else's questions or share some more of my ideas. So I don't care when we do that. That's just up to you. We could do it, tomorrow or a year from now or any point in between.
I have one more interview tomorrow night, and then I'm taking a little break. I have a video project I'm working on, as well as I'm moving and will be building a new studio. So I have my hands full for a little while. When I start my next season of the show, though, I will definitely hit you up and we'll get you on the schedule for that, because I've really enjoyed. I mean, you can read the books and take away what you take away from it, but to talk to someone who was there, it gives a whole other aspect of it. And I think it's just tremendous that I was able to, find that.
Well, I hope I was able to do my end of it, have it make some sense.
You did great. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight, and yeah, I really do look forward to more in the future.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you so much, man.
Until next time, keep the fire going.